The wrong train. The sharp, unexpected scent of polished wood, mingled with something faintly metallic, like rain on a forge, was Willow's first sensory impression. Her heart, already a wild drumbeat, accelerated its frantic rhythm. She tightened her grip on her satchel's worn strap, the smooth river stones inside clinking softly, a small, familiar anchor in a bewildering new world. This was it. The train, the initial leg of her journey to Aunt Maeve's. Adjusting her spectacles, their wire frames cool against her damp fur, she peered through the grand, arched doorway. The platform, a vibrant blur of hurried pause and farewells, receded behind her. A wave of nervous, prickly energy washed over her. She took a tentative step onto plush carpet that seemed to absorb her pores whole, then another. This was far grander than she'd imagined for a public conveyance. Her expectations had leaned towards utilitarian, perhaps a little worn, with the faint scent of coal smoke and old leather. Not this. The carriage was less a compartment, more a lavish salon. High, arched windows, framed by heavy, midnight velvet drapes, offered fleeting glimpses of the bustling station. Soft light, diffused by intricate glass fixtures, hanging from the impossibly high ceiling, cast a warm, golden glow. Walls were lined with rich, dark wood paneling, gleaming with a liquid sheen, inlaid with swirling patterns of a lighter, contrasting timber. Every detail spoke of meticulous craftsmanship, a luxury so far removed from her simple existence that merely standing there felt almost sacrilegious. Willow swallowed, her throat suddenly parched, her knuckles whitened as she clutched her satchel tighter. This couldn't be right. Public trains, the ones she'd glimpsed on rare city visits, were practical, noisy affairs. Their seats were upholstered in scratchy wool or sturdy canvas, built for endurance, not opulent comfort. The air always thrummed with traveller chatter, vendor cries, and the clang of loading baggage. Here, a hushed stillness reigned, broken only by the distant rhythmic thrum of the engine. Her tail, usually neatly curled, tucked itself firmly between her legs. A blush crept up her neck, warming her ears. Had she misread the departure board? Had she stumbled onto a private charter? The thought sparked a fresh surge of panic. A creature of quiet routines, this sudden, inexplicable opulence threatened to completely unmoor her. She advanced cautiously, her gaze sweeping the carriage. To her left, a row of deeply cushioned armchairs, upholstered in emerald velvet, beckoned, each paired with a small, circular, polished rosewood table holding an untouched crystal goblet. To her right, a long, elegant sofa, deep sapphire blue, curved gracefully along the wall, its cushions plump and inviting. Among the seating, intricately carved side tables each bore a delicate ceramic vase, cradling a single, impossibly perfect white lily. The flower's faint, ethereal scent mingled with the wood and that initial metallic undertone. This was no common passage. This was something else entirely. Something grand, exclusive, and certainly not for a shy, slightly clumsy wolf whose most luxurious possession was a well-worn sketchbook. A soft hiss echoed through the carriage, making her jump. Her gaze darted to the entrance. The heavy arched doors, previously open to the bustling platform, now began to slide inward, silently, inexorably. A sliver of open air, a glimpse of a departing attendant in a crisp uniform, then, with a final, soft sigh, they met in the middle. Click. The sound was barely audible, yet it resonated through her entire body. The sound of finality, of being sealed in. Her breath hitched. She pressed a paw to her chest, feeling her rapid, frantic heartbeat beneath her fur. Trapped. Panic, cold and sharp, coiled in her stomach. She spun, her tail swishing nervously, eyes wide behind her spectacles. Her gaze snagged on a small, discreet plaque set into the wall beside the closed doors. It was engraved with an unfamiliar crest, a stylized wolf's head, powerful and regal, crowned with 3 stars. Beneath it, in elegant script, were 2 words, Alpha's Express. Alpha's Express. The words hit her like a physical blow. The Alpha King's private train. The legendary Alpha's Express, spoken of in hushed tones, a symbol of unparalleled power and prestige. Not a common passage to Aunt Maeve's. Oh no, not at all. Her cheeks flushed a deeper crimson. Her ears drooped. A profound wave of mortification, heavy and suffocating, washed over her. How could she have made such a colossal mistake? The public train platform was clearly marked, a different track, a different section of the station entirely. Had she been so lost in thought, so consumed by nervous anticipation, that she'd blundered onto the wrong platform, boarded the most spectacularly wrong train possible? She squeezed her eyes shut, wishing the polished floor would simply open and swallow her. When she reopened them, the luxurious carriage remained, solid and unyielding. The silence, previously mere quietude, now felt heavy, oppressive, amplifying the frantic rhythm of her own breathing. She was alone, completely alone in the Alpha King's private train, an hour before its scheduled departure, an hour before anyone of importance would likely board. A full hour to devise an escape, to rectify this monumental error, to somehow slip away before discovery, before her quiet, unassuming life became irrevocably entangled with the most powerful wolf in the land. Her gaze darted to the ornate windows, thick, impenetrable. They reflected her own wide-eyed, anxious face. No escape there. The doors were sealed. She was truly, utterly stuck. A whimper, small and pathetic, escaped her throat. Willow, the shy, artistic wolf who avoided confrontation at all costs, had somehow managed to blunder her way onto the Alpha King's private train, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. The distant rumble of the engine grew louder, a deep, resonant hum vibrating through the floorboards, a promise of imminent departure. She was well and truly on the wrong train. A royal encounter, the train steady. Deep hum resonated through the luxurious velvet, a rhythmic pulse mirroring Willow's own racing heart. A cold, sharp dread tightened its grip. She pressed her nose to the window, the passing scenery blurring into streaks of green and blue. The stark truth hit her. She was on the Alpha King's private carriage, and it was undeniably moving. Each revolution of the wheels pulled her further from Aunt Maeve's, away from the familiar, and deeper into a predicament she couldn't begin to fathom. A sudden, resonant voice, rich with authority yet tinged with an unexpected warmth, cut through the gentle rumble. "Who are you, little one?" Willow nearly bounded from her seat. She spun around, her tail instinctively tucking low. Framed in the doorway stood a wolf of imposing stature. His fur, the color of rich earth, was impeccably groomed, and his amber eyes held an intensity that could both command and soothe. Perched amidst his thick fur sat a crown, not gaudy, but a simple band of polished silver set with a single dark stone that seemed to drink in the carriage's ambient light. King Alpha Rex. Her breath hitched. This was no attendant, no guard. This was him, the Alpha King, the one whose decrees wove the very fabric of their society, whose visage graced every official building, whose name was whispered with a reverence bordering on fear, and he was looking at her, a demure wolf who cherished the quiet solitude of her sketchbook over any public assembly. Mortification, hot and stinging, flared across her cheeks. She was caught, undeniably out of place, in the most exclusive of settings. I am Willow," she stammered, her voice a reedy whisper. Her gaze dropped to her paws, suddenly mesmerized by the intricate patterns of the expensive rug beneath them. I apologize, Your Majesty. There's been a dreadful mistake. I thought this was the public line to Willow Creek. I was going to Aunt Maeve's. The doors, they just closed. She gestured vaguely, her words tumbling out in a rush, desperate to explain, to make him grasp the sheer, improbable absurdity of her plight. King Alpha Rex's expression remained unreadable, though a subtle twitch at the corner of his mouth might have hinted at amusement. Or perhaps her frantic mind was simply conjuring any sign of leniency. Willow, he repeated, the name a soft rumble in his chest. You are not on the public line, little one. You are in my private carriage. This train, the Alpha's Express, is not for public passage. He paused, his amber gaze sweeping over her, taking in her dishevelled appearance, the worn satchel clutched in her paw. And it will not stop for another 3 days. The words hung in the air, heavy and irrefutable. 3 days. The implications crashed down like a sudden tsunami. 3 days, marooned on a private train with the Alpha King. 3 days of unavoidable proximity, of endlessly reliving her monumental blunder, of enduring his stern gaze and, no doubt, his judgment. The mere thought sent a tremor through her. 3 days? She managed, her voice fracturing. Her mind frantically searched for an exit, any kind of escape route. But surely there's a way to halt it. A communication cord, a signal? She glanced around the opulent carriage, at the rich tapestries, the gleaming wood, the crystal light fixtures shimmering with refracted light. It felt like a gilded cage. Rex slowly shook his head, the movement catching the light on his silver crown. The Express is engineered for uninterrupted travel, Willow. Once departed, it proceeds directly to its destination. There are no unscheduled stops, no emergency exits to the outside, and no disembarking until we reach the capital. His voice, though firm, held an undertone that hinted at something beyond mere stoicism. Perhaps a touch of weariness, or even a hidden understanding. He stepped further into the carriage, his presence filling the space, making it feel smaller, more intimate. Willow instinctively recoiled, bumping into the velvet seat. Her tail twitched nervously. "I am truly sorry, Your Majesty," she whispered again, her cheeks burning. "I meant no disrespect. I wouldn't dream of intruding. I promise I'll be as silent as a shadow. I'll stay completely out of your way. I can simply sit in a corner. I won't disturb you. She trailed off, tears pricking at her eyes. The sheer powerlessness of her situation was overwhelming. Rex regarded her for another long moment, his gaze unwavering. "There is no need for apologies, Willow," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle now, shedding some of its initial sternness. "A mistake has indeed been made, but it is one that cannot be undone. For the next 3 days, you are my unexpected guest. We will simply have to make the best of it." He gestured to the empty seat opposite hers. "Perhaps you would care to explain precisely how you managed to board the Alpha's Express under heavy guard, mistaking it for the public line." There was a challenge in his tone, but also a glimmer of curiosity, as if her improbable tale had genuinely piqued his interest. Willow swallowed hard, her heart still thrumming against her ribs. Trapped. 3 days. With the Alpha King. This was not Aunt Maeve's. This was something else entirely. Something far, far more terrifying. And yet, as she met his steady gaze, she saw not just the imposing ruler, but a flicker of something else. A deep, quiet wisdom that, for a fleeting moment, made the enormity of her predicament feel just a tiny bit less suffocating. She straightened her shoulders, took a shaky breath, and began to recount her disastrous journey to the station. First day of silence. The rhythmic clatter of the train wheels against the tracks was a constant, unsettling drumbeat, Marking the passage of time, Willow wished she could fast forward. She was curled in the plush velvet armchair furthest from the imposing desk where King Alpha Rex now sat. Sunlight filtered through the ornate window, cast shifting patterns across the rich wood and polished brass of the carriage, but did little to dispel the chill that had settled deep in Willow's bones. She tried to make herself as small as possible, a shadow blending into the opulent furnishings. Her gaze was fixed on the passing landscape, a blur of green fields and distant, snow-capped peaks that seemed to mock her confinement. Rex, on the other hand, exuded an aura of focused calm. He was immersed in a formidable stack of documents, his brow furrowed in concentration. The occasional rustle of paper was the only sound he made, a stark contrast to the quiet hum of Willow's frantic thoughts. She risked a quick glance in his direction. He was a formidable figure, even seated, his broad shoulders filling the tailored jacket. A lock of dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and he absently pushed it back, revealing a sharp, intelligent gaze fixed on the page before him. He hadn't spoken since their awkward exchange at the carriage door. The silence was thick, heavy, pressing down on Willow until she felt she might suffocate under its weight. She fidgeted, her fingers tracing the intricate embroidery on her simple cotton dress. Every nerve ending was alert, hyper-aware of his presence, even when he seemed oblivious to hers. Hours crawled by. The sun arced higher, then began its slow descent. Willow's stomach rumbled, a mortifying sound in the profound quiet. She pressed a hand to her midsection, hoping the plush fabric of the chair would absorb the embarrassing noise. Rex didn't react, his attention still wholly consumed by his work. She wondered if he even remembered she was there. Perhaps he was simply pretending she didn't exist, hoping she would spontaneously combust or simply fade away. The thought was both terrifying and strangely appealing. As dusk began to paint the sky in hues of orange and violet, a soft chime echoed through the carriage. A moment later, a uniformed attendant appeared, pushing a discreet trolley laden with dinner. The aroma of roasted meat and herbs wafted through the air, making Willow's mouth water. She watched, mesmerized, as the attendant expertly laid out a white linen tablecloth on a small table near Rex's desk, then presented a series of exquisite dishes. Rex nodded dismissively at the attendant, who then bowed and retreated. Willow expected him to begin eating, to ignore her hunger as he had ignored her presence all day. Instead, he pushed a plate, a fork, and a knife across the polished surface of the table, towards an empty chair directly opposite his. Then, with a subtle gesture, he indicated the food. His voice, when it finally broke the day's long silence, was low, almost a murmur, yet it resonated with an authority that brooked no argument. "Eat, Willow." The unexpected invitation, so simple and direct, startled her. She stared at the plate, then at him. He was looking at her now, his silver eyes unreadable but not unkind. There was an unexpected gentleness in his gaze that surprised her. It was a stark contrast to the stern Alpha she had imagined. The tension that had held her captive all day began to ease, just a fraction. "Oh," she managed, her voice a little reedy. "Thank you, Your Majesty." She slowly rose from her armchair, feeling the stiffness in her muscles from hours of rigid stillness. As she approached the table, she noticed the meticulous arrangement of the meal: perfectly roasted lamb, a medley of vibrant vegetables, and a delicate-looking pastry. It was a feast, far grander than anything she had ever eaten. She hesitated, unsure which fork to use, acutely aware of his eyes on her. Rex picked up his own fork, a silent instruction. Willow mirrored his movement, her hand trembling slightly as she served herself a modest portion. The first bite of lamb was a revelation, tender, succulent, bursting with flavor. She ate slowly, savoring each mouthful, acutely conscious of the quiet dignity of their shared meal. He ate with practiced grace, occasionally glancing up, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before returning to his plate. He didn't speak, didn't question, didn't comment on her earlier hunger. He simply offered food, an act of silent, unexpected kindness that warmed her more than the delicious meal itself. The day, which had begun with such terror and awkwardness, ended with a flicker of something she hadn't anticipated. A tentative sense of truce, perhaps even a hint of understanding, between a trapped wolf and her unwilling captor. A blanket of comfort, the rhythmic clack of the train on the tracks, once a lulling drone, had transformed into a relentless hammer against Willow's skull. Darkness pressed in from all sides, pierced only by the faint, diffused glow from Rex's compartment door. Sleep, a distant and cherished memory, refused to come. Her small bunk, though soft, felt alien and unyielding compared to the familiar embrace of her own bed at home, with its worn quilt and the gentle sway of the willow tree outside her window. Every ache in her body seemed amplified in the quiet of the night. Her stomach, though satiated by Rex's surprising generosity, still churned with a nervous energy she couldn't banish. She missed the comforting scent of pine needles and damp earth that clung to her fur after a long day in the forest. Here, the air was thick with the faint metallic tang of the train and Rex's own potent, musky scent, a constant, unnerving reminder of her captivity. A shiver traced its way down her spine, despite the relative warmth of the cabin. It wasn't just the chill, it was the profound sense of isolation, the crushing weight of her predicament. She was a leaf swept far from her branch, utterly at the mercy of a wind she didn't understand. A small, involuntary whimper escaped her lips, quickly stifled by a hand clamped over her mouth, but the tears, once held back by sheer force of will, now streamed freely down her temples, dampening the pillow beneath her. Her chest tightened, and soft, almost inaudible sniffles punctuated the train's steady rumble. She tried to muffle them, burying her face deeper into the pillow, but the sound seemed to echo in the confined space. A soft click broke the silence, followed by the gentle creak of Rex's door opening. Willow froze, her breath catching in her throat. Had he heard her? Was she about to face his anger for her weakness? She squeezed her eyes shut, feigning sleep, but her rapid heartbeat betrayed her. A shadow fell over her bunk. She could feel his presence, tall and imposing, even without opening her eyes. The air grew heavy with his scent, no longer just powerful but tinged with something she couldn't quite decipher. Concern. It was an absurd thought. Then, a rustle. A warmth suddenly settled over her. She cautiously opened one eye. Rex stood over her, a dark silhouette against the faint light from his compartment. He was holding a thick, woolen blanket, its deep forest green a stark contrast to the stark white sheets of the bunk. He had draped it carefully over her, tucking it gently around her shoulders. "Willow." His voice was a low murmur, barely above a whisper, its usual commanding edge softened by the darkness. "You're cold." She didn't respond, her throat tight with a mix of fear and something else. Surprise, perhaps. He didn't press her. Instead, he sat down on the edge of her bunk, the mattress dipping slightly under his weight. The unexpected proximity made her stiffen, but he didn't move closer, maintaining a respectful distance. "It's okay to be scared," he said, his voice still soft, almost tender. The words hung in the air, a startling admission from the formidable Alpha King. Being away from your pack, from what's familiar, it's unsettling. Willow finally opened both eyes, peering at him through the gloom. His face was a blur in the dim light, but she could sense a rare vulnerability in his posture, a quiet understanding that completely disarmed her. He wasn't looking at her with the calculating gaze she'd come to expect, but with a gaze that seemed to hold a flicker of empathy. She started, her voice a reedy whisper. I just miss home. He nodded slowly. I understand. The first time I had to leave my own den for an extended journey, I felt the same way. A different kind of fear, perhaps, but the loneliness was the same. He paused, then added, This journey is unexpected for both of us. But you are safe here, Willow. No harm will come to you while you are under my care. The words, spoken with such quiet conviction, were a balm to her frayed nerves. It wasn't an apology for her confinement, but it was a promise. And coming from King Alpha Rex, it was a promise that carried weight. He shifted slightly, preparing to rise. Try to rest. We have a long day ahead. As he stood, he reached out, his large hand hovering for a moment above her head, as if debating whether to offer a comforting touch. He ultimately pulled back, but the unspoken gesture resonated with her. He simply turned and returned to his compartment, leaving her wrapped in the heavy blanket, its wool retaining the faint warmth of his hands. The sniffles had stopped, the tears had dried, the rhythmic clack of the train still hammered, but now, beneath the blanket, there was a tentative sense of comfort. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it had softened, leaving a small, unexpected space for surprise and a fragile sense of security. King Alpha Rex, the fearsome ruler, had offered her a blanket and a sliver of understanding. And in the vast, terrifying expanse of her captivity, that small act felt like a lifeline. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since boarding the train, a fragile hope flickered within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she wouldn't be entirely alone. Sharing small stories. The morning light, a soft pale gold, filtered through the ornate window panes, painting stripes across the plush carpet. Willow stirred, the unfamiliar softness of the blanket a stark contrast to the hard forest floor she was accustomed to. Her eyes fluttered open, immediately locking onto the broad back of King Alpha Rex, who stood gazing out the window, a cup steaming in his massive paw. He seemed less a captor and more a formidable, contemplative statue in the dawn light. A tremor of unease still fluttered in her chest, but it was softer now, muffled by the memory of his unexpected kindness from the night before. She remembered the warmth of the blanket, the unexpected empathy in his voice. It had been a small gesture, yet it had carved a fragile space for hope in her fear. Rex turned, his gaze sweeping over her, not with aggression, but with a quiet intensity that made her instinctively pull the blanket tighter. "Morning," he rumbled, his voice a low thrum. "Sleep well." Willow nodded, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, thank you, Alpha King." The title felt clumsy on her tongue, too formal for the intimate space they shared. He grunted, moving to a small table laden with an array of breakfast items she'd only ever dreamed of. Plump, glistening berries, freshly baked bread, an aromatic cheese. "Just Rex is fine," he said, surprising her again. "Sit. Eat." He gestured to the opposite seat at the table, his movements economical and powerful. Hesitantly, Willow rose, the blanket still clutched around her shoulders like a shield. She chose a piece of bread, small and unassuming, her gaze still flicking towards him. "You're a long way from home, Willow," Rex observed, his voice even. He took a long swallow from his cup, his eyes fixed on her. "Tell me about it. Your pack. Your family." Willow's paw, poised to bring the bread to her mouth, froze. Her home. The images flashed in her mind, the towering pines, the scent of damp earth after a rain, the boisterous laughter of her younger cousins. A pang of homesickness, sharp and sudden, pierced through the fragile comfort. My pack is the Silverwood pack, she began, her voice a reedy whisper. We live by the Whispering Falls. My mother, she's a healer, and my father, he's a hunter. I have 2 younger brothers, Finn and Rowan, and a cousin, Ilara, who's my age. She trailed off, the words feeling thin and inadequate to describe the vibrant tapestry of her life. Rex's expression remained unreadable, but he leaned forward slightly, a silent invitation to continue. I like flowers, she said, the words tumbling out without conscious thought, especially the moon-petal lilies that grow near the falls. They only bloom at night, and they smell like starlight and honey. A faint blush crept onto her cheeks. It sounded so silly, so trivial in the presence of an alpha king. To her surprise, a flicker of something she couldn't quite decipher, curiosity, amusement, crossed his face. Moon-petal lilies, he repeated, the words rolling off his tongue in a surprisingly soft cadence. I haven't seen those. Encouraged by his lack of dismissal, she continued, a little more confidently. And I like to draw, with charcoal. I find smooth stones and draw the trees, the animals, sometimes even the moon-petal lilies. She looked down at her paws, feeling a surge of embarrassment. This was hardly the conversation one had with an alpha king. Draw, you say? Rex mused, his gaze unwavering. What do you draw best? Willow hesitated, thinking. Ilara, she finally said, a small smile touching her lips at the thought of her mischievous cousin. She's always getting into scrapes, and her expressions are so animated. Once she tried to climb the tallest pine in the territory, convinced there was a nest of rare bluebirds at the top. She got stuck, of course, and her face when my father finally coaxed her down was a masterpiece of indignation and smeared pine sap. A low chuckle, deep and resonant, escaped Rex's chest. It was the first time she'd heard him truly laugh, and it was a startling sound, one that held unexpected warmth. A genuine smile, a brief flash of white teeth, transformed his stern features, softening the hard lines around his eyes. He looked, for a fleeting moment, less like a terrifying alpha king and more like just Rex. The sound and the sight of his smile eased some of the remaining tension in Willow's shoulders. She hadn't realized how tightly she'd been wound until that moment. He wasn't mocking her. He was simply listening. She got the bluebirds? Rex asked, a hint of amusement still in his voice. Willow shook her head, a soft laugh bubbling up from within her. No, just a very grumpy squirrel who chased her halfway down the trunk. Rex's smile lingered, a surprising, welcome presence in the quiet carriage. The clatter of the train on the tracks seemed to recede, replaced by a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft sounds of them eating. The fear hadn't vanished entirely, but it had receded further, leaving behind a fragile, tentative truce. It was a strange feeling, this budding sense of ease with her formidable captor, and as she looked at the Alpha King across the table, she realized she was curious too. Curious about the wolf who listened to stories of moon-petal lilies and mischievous cousins, and who, for some reason, seemed to care. The king's world. The clatter of the train wheels was a constant, almost soothing rhythm now. Willow, curled on the plush bench, traced the intricate patterns in the upholstery. Rex sat opposite her, not reading or observing, but staring intently at something on the small, polished table between them. Curiosity, a feeling that had become less terrifying and more insistent since their shared laughter over moon petals, finally pushed her to speak. "What are you looking at?" Her voice was softer than she intended, a mere whisper against the train's hum. Rex's head lifted, his gaze, sharp as always, landed on her. For a moment, she braced herself, a phantom fear tightening her chest, but his expression was thoughtful, not menacing. "This," he said, gesturing to the table. "Come closer if you wish." Hesitantly, Willow slid across the bench. As she drew nearer, she realized it wasn't a book or a document, but a map. Not just any map, but a vast, meticulously detailed rendering of the entire Wolflands. It sprawled across the small table, unfurling like a secret tapestry. Rivers snaked in silver lines, forests were rendered in shades of emerald and jade, and mountains rose in jagged charcoal peaks. Tiny symbols, almost imperceptible unless you leaned in close, marked villages, hunting grounds, and even ancient patrol routes. "It's beautiful," Willow breathed, her eyes wide. She'd only ever seen simplified maps, the kind that showed the direct path to the nearest market town. This was different, alive. Rex's finger, broad and calloused, moved across the parchment. "This is the Northern Reach," he explained, his voice losing its usual regal cadence, replaced by something more instructive, almost like a teacher. "The winters there are brutal, but the fur trade is vital. We established a new trading post last season here." He tapped a small crimson dot. "It's cut travel time by a third for the mountain clans." His finger shifted, tracing a winding river. "The Silverwood River, as you know, feeds into the Great Lake, but further upstream, near the Sunstone Falls, there's a persistent issue with rogue bears encroaching on our hunting territories. We sent a specialized patrol unit last week." Willow listened, mesmerized. She'd always imagined the Alpha King's duties to be grand proclamations and stern judgments. She hadn't envisioned him poring over maps, meticulously planning logistics, and fretting over the welfare of individual clans. This wasn't just a king, this was a guardian. How do you remember all of this?" she asked, genuinely astounded. The sheer volume of information, the interconnectedness of every detail was staggering. A faint smile, almost imperceptible, touched Rex's lips. "It's my world, Willow. Every ridge, every valley, every pack living within these borders. My responsibility." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the map, imbued with a quiet intensity. "My people depend on me to ensure their safety, their prosperity, to make sure the young ones grow up in a world where they can hunt freely and sleep soundly." He pointed to a cluster of small, faded symbols near the southern border. "This is where your village is, isn't it? Near the Whispering Pines?" Willow's heart gave a sudden lurch. Homesickness, a dull ache that had receded in the face of her burgeoning curiosity, flared anew. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick. "We're known for our basket weaving and our moon petal fields." Rex nodded slowly. "I know of your village. Good, honest wolves. There was a drought a few years back, remember? The harvests were poor." Willow nodded, remembering the lean times, the fear in her parents' eyes. "Yes, it was hard." "We diverted excess grain from the Central Plains packs," Rex continued, his finger moving to a broad, fertile region on the map. "Enough to get your village, and several others through the winter. It was a close call." A lump formed in Willow's throat. She had known the Alpha King had intervened during the drought, a distant, abstract act of leadership. But to hear him speak of it now, with such detail and quiet concern, brought it to life. This wasn't a distant, fearsome ruler. This was the wolf who had ensured her family had food on their table. She looked at Rex, truly looked at him, and saw beyond the formidable Alpha, beyond the captor. She saw the heavy burden of his crown, the intricate web of duties that bound him. His eyes, though always keen, held a weariness she hadn't noticed before, a subtle tension in his jaw that hinted at the relentless pressure he lived under. He wasn't just a king, he was a shepherd, a protector, a strategist. Her initial fear, which had softened into tentative truce, now began to give way to something akin to respect. She saw the dedication, the sheer unwavering commitment that underscored every decision he made, every journey he undertook. The man who had shared a quiet laugh over moon petals was also the unwavering pillar upholding an entire kingdom. The world outside the train, the world she longed for, was shaped and guarded by this very wolf, and for the first time she began to understand the true weight of his title, and perhaps the true measure of the wolf who wore it. The clatter of the train wheels seemed to deepen, a rhythmic drumbeat to the unfolding realization within her. The king's world was vast, complex, and unexpectedly deeply personal. And she, a small, timid wolf, was getting a glimpse behind the curtain of its formidable ruler. A trembling touch Willow stared at the intricate lines etched across the massive map, a silent testament to Rex's tireless vigilance. The small, familiar symbol of her village, nestled near the winding river, brought a pang of homesickness, sharp and sudden. Yet, superimposed on that ache was a burgeoning respect for the Alpha King, a man who, despite his imposing stature and fearsome reputation, had clearly saved her people from starvation. The thought was disorienting, shifting her internal landscape as thoroughly as the train shifted its course through the vast wilderness outside. She traced a finger lightly over the faded ink, a silent question forming on her lips. How did you know about the drought? Her voice, usually a soft murmur, held a thread of genuine curiosity, overriding her habitual timidity. Rex, who had been studying another section of the map, turned his gaze to her. His eyes, usually intense and assessing, softened almost imperceptibly. "My scouts are everywhere," he stated, his tone matter-of-fact. "My people are my responsibility. All of them." He paused, then added, a hint of something unreadable in his voice, "Even those who wander onto private transport." A blush spread across Willow's cheeks. He wasn't cruel about it, but the reminder of her blunder still stung. "I truly apologize, Your Majesty. It was a mistake I deeply regret." He merely grunted, a sound that could have been agreement or dismissal. He gestured to a series of dots along a mountainous range. "These are the winter hunting grounds. The snows are heavier than usual this year, so I've dispatched extra patrols to ensure the packs aren't cut off from their prey." His attention, for a moment, seemed entirely absorbed by the logistics of his kingdom. He was not just a king. He was a meticulous strategist, a guardian. Willow found herself studying him, not with fear, but with a strange, burgeoning fascination. The harsh lines of his jaw, the deep-set eyes, even the slight furrow in his brow as he concentrated, they all spoke of a burden she was only just beginning to comprehend. He wasn't a monster. He was a leader, burdened by the weight of 1,000 lives. Suddenly, a violent lurch shook the carriage. The entire train groaned, a metallic shriek that echoed through the confined space. Willow, caught off guard while admiring the map, gasped, her paws scrambling for purchase on the polished floor. Her balance, never her strong suit, failed her completely. With a startled yelp, she pitched forward, a blur of grey fur and flailing limbs. Before she could hit the hard ground, strong arms shot out, intercepting her fall. Her head collided softly with something solid and warm. Rex's chest. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, and for a dizzying moment, she was pressed flush against him, a wild rush of unexpected sensations overwhelming her. The scent of him, rich earth, pine, and something uniquely feral, filled her senses. His fur, thick and powerful, brushed against her cheek. She instinctively braced her paws against his chest, pushing herself away slightly, but his grip remained firm. Their eyes met, hers, wide with shock and a sudden unfamiliar warmth, locked with his. In the depth of his dark gaze, she saw not anger, but a flicker of surprise, quickly followed by something else. A spark, a strange, undeniable current that hummed between them, holding her captive in the moment. The carriage settled back into its rhythm, but the world around them seemed to hold its breath. His arms, coiled around her waist, were solid and unyielding. The warmth of his body seeped into hers, a comforting heat that was both startling and oddly reassuring. He held her for a breath too long, his thumb brushing lightly against her side, a feather-light touch that sent a shiver through her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the sudden silence. A deep rumble vibrated in his chest, and he cleared his throat, a low, gravelly sound that broke the spell. "Are you all right, Willow?" His voice was gruff, a little rougher than usual. "Yes," she managed, her voice a reedy whisper. "Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you." He released her slowly, his hands lingering for a moment before dropping to his sides. As he pulled away, a flush crept up his neck, darkening the fur around his powerful jaw. Willow felt her own cheeks burn, the heat spreading from her neck to the tips of her ears. The sudden proximity, the accidental intimacy, had left them both flustered, a silent acknowledgement of the unspoken energy that had arced between them. She took a hasty step back, her paws feeling clumsy. The map, so recently the focus of her attention, now seemed a distant, insignificant detail. The air between them crackled with an entirely different kind of tension. Dreams of old. The carriage, previously filled with the low hum of the train and the rustle of papers, now held a different kind of silence. It was taut, charged, almost thrumming with an unspoken energy that had not been there moments before. Willow, her cheeks still warm with a blush she couldn't quite banish, found her gaze darting towards the window, then back to the meticulous maps spread across the table. Rex, too, seemed to have retreated into himself, though the corner of his lips held a faint, almost imperceptible curve of amusement. The accidental touch, the brief, intense meeting of their eyes, had fractured the careful distance between them, leaving behind a subtle yet undeniable awareness. "You're quiet," Rex observed, his voice a low rumble that cut through the lingering tension. He leaned back against the plush velvet seat, his posture relaxed, yet his eyes were sharp, observing her with an intensity that made her squirm slightly. Willow cleared her throat, fumbling for a response. "Just thinking about home," she offered, the half-truth feeling inadequate. Her mind was, in fact, still replaying the brush of his fur against hers, the surprising strength of his arms, and the warmth that had bloomed in her chest. Rex hummed, a thoughtful sound. "Home is a powerful anchor, isn't it?" He paused, then continued, his voice softening. Before all this," he gestured vaguely around the opulent carriage, encompassing his regal duties. "I had different anchors, different dreams." Willow's ears perked up, curiosity momentarily eclipsing her self-consciousness. She had never considered Alpha King Rex having dreams outside of strategy and governance. He seemed carved from duty, a formidable presence, without a past, beyond his throne. "Dreams?" she echoed, her voice small. He nodded, a faint smile touching his lips, softening the stern lines of his face. "Yes, grand dreams for a pup who had no idea what fate had in store for him." His gaze drifted to the window, watching the blur of the passing landscape. "I wanted to see it all. The world, I mean. Not just the familiar forests and rivers of our territory, but beyond. To the jagged peaks where the ice never melts, to the sun-scorched deserts where strange creatures roam, to the vast, shimmering oceans that stretch further than the eye can see." Willow found herself leaning forward, completely captivated. This was a side of Rex she hadn't even dared to imagine. The king, the formidable leader, had once harboured the wanderlust of a young wolf. You wanted to explore, she breathed, picturing him, not as the imposing alpha, but as a young, adventurous pup, his eyes bright with wonder. More than anything, he confirmed, a wistful note entering his tone. I spent hours poring over old maps, tracing routes to lands only whispered about in ancient tales. I imagined myself navigating treacherous ravines, discovering hidden valleys, meeting packs with customs entirely different from our own. I dreamt of charting new territories, of contributing to the collective knowledge of our kind, not with decrees, but with discoveries. He chuckled, a low, genuine sound that sent a shiver down Willow's spine. My tutors despaired. They tried to steer me towards statecraft, to the intricacies of alliances and resource management. But my head was always in the clouds, or rather in the uncharted territories beyond them. Willow could almost see it, a younger Rex, perhaps less burdened by the weight of his crown, filled with an unadulterated passion for the unknown. It was a stark contrast to the guarded, strategic wolf she'd come to know, and it made him seem accessible, human, or rather wolf. What stopped you? She asked, the question escaping before she could censor it. It felt bold, perhaps too personal, but the current of intimacy in the carriage urged her on. Rex's smile faded, replaced by a shadow of melancholy. My father's illness. It came suddenly, and with it, the undeniable truth of succession. My dreams of exploration had to be set aside for the immediate reality of leadership. There was no time for wanderlust when the stability of the pack, of the entire kingdom, rested on my shoulders. He sighed, a heavy, soundless exhalation. Duty called, and I answered, as any alpha must. He turned his gaze back to her, and this time his eyes held a depth she hadn't noticed before. A profound weariness, perhaps, but also a quiet strength that transcended his youth. And you, Willow? What were your dreams before our paths so unexpectedly intersected? The question hung in the air, a gentle invitation. Willow felt a peculiar warmth spread through her chest, a feeling not entirely attributable to embarrassment. He wasn't just being polite. He seemed genuinely curious. And after his confession, she felt a strange, compelling urge to share. Mine were simpler, she began, her voice still a little hesitant. I dreamt of finding the perfect clearing for a new den, of cultivating the richest berry bushes, of teaching the young pups how to track the most elusive prey. I dreamt of a quiet life, a peaceful life, surrounded by my kin. She paused, a small, sad smile gracing her lips. I never dreamt of royal trains or alpha kings. Rex's expression softened further, a hint of understanding in his eyes. The tension, while still present, had transformed into something softer, more reflective. The carriage, once a cage, now felt like a confessional, a space where two disparate wolves were, for the first time, truly seeing glimpses of each other's hearts. The tracks beneath them continued their relentless rhythm, carrying them further away from their pasts and closer to an uncertain future. Shared creations, the confession of his youthful wanderlust, hung in the air, a delicate counterpoint to her whispered desires for a quiet existence. A new layer of understanding settled between them, warm and inviting. Willow found herself looking at Rex not just as her formidable captor, but as a wolf who, beneath the weight of his crown, harboured a spirit that once yearned for the open road, much like her own quieter dreams of a sun-dappled glade. The shared moment of vulnerability had opened a small, unexpected door in her heart. A flutter of courage, unusual for her, stirred within Willow. She thought of the small, leather-bound sketchbook tucked into her travel satchel, a silent companion throughout her solitary journey. It held glimpses of the world as she saw it, captured in charcoal and ink. Now, emboldened by Rex's surprising candor, a daring impulse took hold. I sometimes draw," she admitted, her voice barely above a murmur, her gaze fixed on the intricate patterns of the carriage rug. She felt a blush creeping up her neck, unsure why the revelation felt so intensely personal, so vulnerable. Rex's head tilted slightly, a spark of genuine curiosity lighting his eyes. "Do you?" His tone was soft, devoid of judgment or surprise, simply an invitation to continue. Drawing a deep breath, Willow reached for her satchel, fumbling with the clasp. Her fingers trembled slightly as she pulled out the worn sketchbook. It felt heavy in her hands, suddenly imbued with the weight of her deepest self. She flipped through a few pages, her eyes scanning familiar landscapes, the faces of strangers she'd observed from afar, the intricate bark of ancient trees. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the quiet hum of the train. She stopped on a particular page, a drawing she had completed only a few weeks prior. It was a dense forest, not unlike the one she often sought refuge in, but imbued with a fantastical quality. Sunlight dappled through an impossible canopy of leaves, illuminating a hidden waterfall, cascading into a crystal-clear pool. Moss-covered rocks glistened, and tiny, unseen creatures seemed to hum within the vibrant foliage. It was a place of peace, of hidden beauty, a sanctuary of her own creation. Taking another fortifying breath, she held the sketchbook out to him. Her hand wavered almost imperceptibly. "This is one of them." Rex took the book from her, his large paw surprisingly gentle as he accepted it. His fingers, calloused from battle and the daily demands of his station, brushed hers momentarily, sending a jolt through her arm that made her breath catch. He held the sketchbook carefully, his eyes focused entirely on the drawing. The silence that followed was thick with anticipation. Willow watched his face, trying to decipher his expression. His brow was furrowed in concentration, his gaze unwavering as he absorbed every detail of her artwork. She felt a knot tighten in her stomach, a dizzying mix of hope and trepidation. What if he thought it was childish, unskilled? What if her private world, laid bare, was met with indifference? Then, a slow, appreciative smile spread across his lips, transforming his usually formidable features into something unexpectedly warm. "Willow," he said, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the carriage. "This is remarkable." Her ears twitched, hot with embarrassment and something else, something thrilling. "The light," he continued, his gaze still fixed on the drawing. "It's almost alive. You've captured the essence of a place that feels both real and imagined. The way the shadows play, the sense of depth. It's truly captivating." He traced a finger lightly along the charcoal outline of a gnarled tree trunk. "You have a gift." His praise, delivered with such sincerity, struck her with the force of a gentle wave. Her cheeks flushed a deeper crimson. A warmth spread through her chest, a sensation she hadn't recognized before. It wasn't just relief, though that was certainly part of it. It was a lightness, an exhilaration that made her feel as if she could float. Her heart, which had been a frantic drumbeat moments before, now performed a delicate, rapid dance, a flutter of excitement she couldn't quell. "Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice thick with emotion. She couldn't meet his eyes, instead focusing on the strong line of his jaw. The unfamiliar feeling bloomed within her, vibrant and new. It was a feeling of being seen, truly seen and appreciated for a part of herself she usually kept hidden. And it felt wonderful. Rex looked up from the drawing, his gaze meeting hers. A softness lingered in his eyes, an acknowledgement of the vulnerable exchange that had just taken place. He gently closed the sketchbook and, rather than handing it back immediately, held it for a moment longer, a silent testament to the shared connection. "You should share your talent more often, Willow," he said, his voice imbued with genuine encouragement. "The world could use more beauty like this." The simple words, coming from him, resonated deep within her. The flutter in her chest intensified, a vibrant, hopeful pulse. It was a feeling she knew, with a sudden, startling clarity, she wanted to feel again. The last evening's gaze. The last embers of the sunset bled across the vast empty plains, painting the carriage window in hues of bruised violet and burning orange. Inside, the quiet hum of the train felt different, imbued with the bittersweet understanding that their journey was nearing its end. Willow, still slightly flushed from Rex's praise, carefully closed her sketchbook. The fantastical landscape of towering crystal mountains and shimmering rivers now safely tucked away. She felt a lightness she hadn't known in years, a sense of having unfurled a tightly held part of herself, and found it not just accepted, but cherished. Rex, who had been watching her, leaned back against the plush velvet seat, a faint smile playing on his lips. The harsh angles of his face seemed softened by the dimming light, and his usually piercing golden eyes held a warmth that made Willow's breath catch. It was a gaze devoid of judgment or authority, a simple, profound appreciation that resonated deep within her. He truly saw her, not just as a shy wolf who stumbled into his carriage, but as the intricate, creative being she was. "You know," he began, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the quiet space, "I often find journeys tedious, necessary, but predictable." He paused, his eyes still fixed on her. "This one, however..." He chuckled softly, a sound that sent a pleasant shiver down Willow's spine. "This one has been anything but." Willow's tail, which had been resting demurely beside her, gave a small, involuntary twitch. She felt a surge of unexpected courage, a newfound willingness to engage with him, to explore the surprising depths of their connection. I'm glad it wasn't tedious for you," she murmured, her voice still soft, but clearer than it would have been just days ago. He shifted, turning slightly to face her more directly. "More than glad, Willow. I've enjoyed your company." The words were simple, yet carried a weight of sincerity that transcended mere politeness. "You're different." Her ears perked, a flicker of apprehension mixing with the warmth. Was different a good thing, coming from the Alpha King? She had always been an outlier, too quiet, too absorbed in her own imaginative world to fit seamlessly into the packs she'd encountered. Rex seemed to sense her momentary uncertainty. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying, yet remaining gentle. "Not different in a way that suggests a flaw," he clarified, his voice reassuring. "Quite the opposite. Most wolves, they present themselves in a very specific manner, especially around an alpha. There's a performance, a facade, but you..." He gestured vaguely with one large paw, his eyes sweeping over her, not in scrutiny but in genuine curiosity. "You just are. You don't try to be anything you're not, and that, I've found, is remarkably refreshing." A blush crept up Willow's neck, warming her fur. To be seen so plainly, so truly, was both exhilarating and a little daunting. The thought that her quiet nature, her artistic inclinations, her very essence had not been a source of annoyance but of fascination for him was a revelation. It made her feel valuable, not for what she could do or who she knew, but simply for existing as herself. She couldn't help it. A deep, instinctual happiness bloomed in her chest, and without conscious thought, her tail gave a distinct, joyful wag. It was a small, almost imperceptible movement, a soft swish against the velvet seat, but in the quiet intimacy of the carriage, it was a clear declaration of her burgeoning contentment. Rex's smile widened, crinkling the corners of his eyes. He noticed, of course. His gaze dropped to her tail for a moment, a flicker of amusement and a deeper, unspoken understanding passing between them. "Yes," he said, his voice softer still, almost a murmur. "Distinctly refreshing." The air between them crackled with an unspoken current, a new layer added to the complex tapestry of their unexpected journey. The shyness that had defined Willow for so long began to recede, replaced by a blossoming sense of confidence. She met his gaze directly, a small, tentative smile gracing her lips. The formidable Alpha King, who had initially filled her with terror, now felt like an unexpected confidant, a guardian of her secret world. And as the train rumbled onward, carrying them closer to their destination, Willow knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. A lingering touch, the rhythmic clatter of the train against the tracks, once a relentless reminder of her confinement, now felt like a gentle lullaby, a heartbeat accompanying the blossoming connection between them. Willow found herself leaning more fully into the shared space, the earlier rigidity in her posture having melted away, replaced by a pliant ease. The scent of pine and something uniquely Rex, a musky, comforting anchor, filled her senses, making the world outside the carriage feel distant and irrelevant. Rex's gaze, which had been fixed on the passing landscape, slowly turned to her. The golden light of the setting sun, filtering through the window, caught the subtle shifting of his eyes, revealing a depth she was only beginning to understand. It wasn't the steely command she'd first encountered, but a softer, more introspective gleam. He watched her for a long moment, a quiet contemplation passing between them that needed no words. Then, almost imperceptibly, his large paw, calloused from years of leadership and a warrior's life, reached out. It wasn't a grab, not a demand, but a hesitant, almost fragile gesture. His fingertips brushed against the back of her paw, a feather-like contact that sent a jolt of warmth through Willow. It was a simple touch, yet it contained a universe of unspoken meaning, a bridge built between their vastly different worlds. Her fur, usually so sensitive to touch, didn't bristle in alarm but softened, leaning into the contact. A low murmur rumbled in his chest, a sound so soft she almost missed it amidst the train's gentle sway. "I wish this journey wasn't ending," he said, his voice a gravelly whisper, barely audible above the train's song. His thumb, rough yet tender, stroked the delicate fur on the back of her paw, a small, repetitive motion that grounded her. The weight of his words settled between them, heavy with an unexpected vulnerability. Willow's breath hitched. The thought had been a persistent hum in her own mind, a quiet dread she hadn't dared to voice. The world outside, with its expectations and the harsh realities of their disparate stations, loomed closer with every click of the wheels. Here, within the confines of this carriage, a bubble of understanding and acceptance had formed, unlike anything she had ever known. Her heart, which had been beating a rapid, nervous rhythm, now swelled with a surprising courage. The shyness that had once been her constant companion seemed to recede, replaced by a boldness she hadn't realized she possessed. Empowered by his confession, by the raw honesty in his gaze, she found her voice. "Me too," she whispered, the words barely escaping her lips, yet infused with a sincerity that resonated in the quiet space. Without conscious thought, driven by an invisible force, she leaned in, her body responding to an irresistible pull. The distance between them, which had seemed immense only days ago, now felt insignificant, an artificial barrier ready to dissolve. Her eyes, wide and luminous in the fading light, met his. She could feel the warmth radiating from him, the subtle shift of air as their proximity increased. She saw the minute twitch of his ear, the slight widening of his pupils, mirroring her own heightened senses. The scent of pine and Rex intensified, enveloping her, pulling her deeper into the moment. Their faces drew closer, the space between them shrinking to mere inches. She could feel the soft brush of his breath on her cheek, warm and steady. Her gaze flickered from his intense eyes to the strong line of his jaw, then back to his mouth, slightly parted, revealing just a hint of his canines. The world outside the carriage, the responsibilities, the fear, the titles, it all faded into an indistinct hum. There was only this moment, this shared breath, this unspoken longing that hung suspended in the air between them. The train continued its steady, relentless journey, but in their small, enclosed world, time had all but ceased to exist. Her paw, still held gently beneath his, seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was a delicate dance of anticipation, a silent question hanging between them, waiting to be answered. The air crackled with an electricity that was both thrilling and terrifying. She felt a profound sense of rightness, a belonging she had never thought possible in this unexpected, forbidden proximity. The lingering touch, the murmured wish, the shared silence, it all spoke of a connection that transcended words, a bond forged in the crucible of forced proximity and unexpected understanding. The journey was ending, but something far more significant was just beginning. The whistle breaks the spell. The world outside the Alpha King's private carriage had faded into a soft blur, a forgotten backdrop to the universe that now existed only between Willow and Rex. Their faces were so close that the subtle currents of their breaths mingled, a silent conversation passing between them. Willow could feel the warmth radiating from Rex, a comforting heat that chased away the last vestiges of her initial fear. His eyes, once unreadable depths of power, now held a gentle glint, a mirror reflecting the nascent courage blooming within her. She saw not just the formidable Alpha King, but a burdened ruler, a kind soul who had saved her village and, in doing so, had unexpectedly saved a part of her own spirit. Her gaze drifted to his muzzle, the fur a rich, dark sable, almost black in the carriage's dimming light. A faint scar, thin as a whisper, traced a line just above his nose, a testament to battles fought and won. Yet now, in this moment, it merely added to the rugged handsomeness that had begun to captivate her. She imagined the texture of his fur against her own, a thought that sent a shiver, not of apprehension, but of pure anticipation through her. It was a sensation entirely new, entirely exhilarating. Rex's eyes, still locked with hers, flickered down to her nose, then back to her eyes, a silent question passing between them. His head tilted almost imperceptibly, an invitation she felt deep in her bones. The air thrummed with unspoken words, with desires that had been carefully caged, but were now straining at their confines. The space between them, once vast and intimidating, had shrunk to an insignificant sliver. A breath away from contact, Willow's own nose twitched, a reflexive response to the magnetic pull drawing them closer. Her heart, which had been a nervous flutter for so long, now beat with a steady, resonant rhythm, a drumbeat of burgeoning intimacy. The thought of the journey ending, which had once been her desperate hope, now filled her with an unexpected pang of regret. She had leaned into him, not just physically, but with the entirety of her being, offering a vulnerability she hadn't known she possessed. And he, in turn, had met her there, shedding layers of his own formidable persona to reveal a gentler, more contemplative wolf. Their noses were almost touching, the slight brush of fur a promise of what was to come. The world outside had ceased to exist, replaced by the soft glow of the carriage lantern and the mesmerizing depths of Rex's eyes. It was a suspended moment, a magical bubble of nascent affection and profound understanding. The scent of him, a mix of pine, damp earth, and something uniquely his own, something powerful and comforting, filled her senses, intoxicating her. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, savoring the proximity, the unspoken connection that bound them. Then, without warning, a sound ripped through the quiet intimacy, shattering the delicate spell they had woven. A loud, long, piercing shriek that vibrated through the floorboards and rattled the windows. The train whistle. It wasn't a gentle toot, but a sustained, ear-splitting blast, signaling their imminent arrival. The unexpected intensity of the sound made Willow jump, her muscles tensing and her eyes flying open. The magic moment, so fragile and profound, evaporated in an instant. The sudden intrusion of the outside world was jarring, a harsh reminder of their reality. The illusion of their private universe crumbled, replaced by the stark knowledge that their journey, which had blossomed into something so unexpected and precious, was indeed reaching its end. The carriage jolted slightly, the brakes beginning their slow, grinding protest. The steady rhythm of the wheels, which had been a soothing lullaby for so long, now felt like a countdown. The subtle shift in the air, the decrease in speed, all pointed to one undeniable truth. They were here. The whistle blasted again, a final, insistent declaration, a punctuation mark on their journey. Willow pulled back, her cheeks flushing, a sudden awareness of their close proximity washing over her. Rex, too, straightened, the easy amusement in his eyes replaced by a more familiar, regal contemplation. The formidable Alpha King was back, at least on the surface, but Willow knew, with a certainty that settled deep in her soul, that something fundamental had shifted between them. The whistle might have broken the spell, but it couldn't erase the connection that had been forged in its wake. A promise of return. The shrill shriek of the train whistle, a metallic cry against the deepening twilight, reverberated through the carriage, a harsh pronouncement that shattered the fragile bubble of their shared moment. The world outside, previously a blur of indifferent trees and fleeting shadows, now coalesced into the stark reality of a bustling station. A jolt, then another, as the behemoth slowed, the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of the wheels grinding to a halt. Willow's breath hitched, a small, involuntary sound lost in the sudden cacophony of the station. The warmth of Rex's breath on her fur, the intoxicating scent of pine and something uniquely him, still clung to her senses, a ghost of the almost kiss that had been so cruelly interrupted. Her eyes, wide and luminous in the dimming light, met his, reflecting a shared regret, a silent acknowledgement of what had been lost in the sudden return to reality. He pulled back, his movements slow and deliberate, as if reluctant to break the connection. The air between them, once charged with unspoken desire, now felt heavy with the weight of unspoken words. The intimate space of the carriage, which had been a sanctuary for their burgeoning feelings, suddenly seemed too small, too public. "We've arrived." Rex's voice, usually a deep rumble, was softer now, tinged with a note of something Willow couldn't quite decipher. Disappointment? Resignation? Or perhaps a hint of the same longing that thrummed beneath her own ribs. A porter, a stocky badger with grizzled fur, knocked discreetly on the carriage door. "Alpha King, your destination, sir." Rex gave a curt nod, his regal composure reasserting itself with a subtle shift in his posture. The easygoing, almost vulnerable wolf from moments ago was gone, replaced by the formidable ruler, the Alpha King. Yet, A lingering tenderness in his gaze as he looked at Willow belied the sudden transformation. He moved to open the door, and Willow felt an unexpected pang of sadness. The journey, which had begun with such terror, was ending with a profound sense of loss. She hadn't realized how much she had come to cherish the forced proximity, the shared silences, the unexpected moments of genuine connection. The door swung open, revealing the vibrant chaos of the station platform. Wolves of all ages and sizes bustled past, their scents a dizzying assault after the confined air of the carriage. The aroma of roasted nuts, sweet pastries, and the metallic tang of train smoke filled the air. Rex extended a paw, a silent invitation. Willow hesitated for a fleeting moment, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. Taking his paw felt like an acknowledgement, a tangible extension of the invisible thread that had woven itself between them over the past few days. She placed her paw in his, her fur brushing against his, sending a jolt of warmth through her. He helped her descend the steps, his grip firm and steady. As her paws touched the rough cobblestones of the platform, he didn't immediately release her. Instead, his paw slid from hers, moving to rest gently on the small of her back. The touch was light, almost imperceptible, yet it sent a shiver down her spine, a spark that ignited a new kind of courage within her. His gaze, dark and intense, held hers. The ambient noise of the station faded, the bustling crowds blurring into an indistinct background. It was just them, suspended in a pocket of shared understanding. "We will meet again, Willow," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that resonated deep within her. It wasn't a question, nor a plea, but a statement of undeniable certainty. A promise. The weight of his paw on her back was a physical anchor, grounding her in the moment, in the potent reality of his words. It was a silent vow, a tangible connection, in the midst of a world suddenly rushing in to separate them. He squeezed lightly, a possessive, almost protective gesture, before his paw finally lifted, the lingering warmth of phantom sensation against her fur. He turned then, a ripple of authority preceding him as he moved through the crowd. His guards, burly wolves with watchful eyes, materialized seemingly from nowhere, falling into formation around him. He didn't look back, not even a glance over his broad shoulder. He simply walked away, a powerful, solitary figure disappearing into the throng. Willow stood there, rooted to the spot, watching him go. The scent of pine and alpha lingered in her nostrils, a potent reminder of his presence. Her heart, a moment ago a frantic drum, now throbbed with a strange, exhilarating mix of emotions. There was a knot of wistfulness, a pang of loss at the abrupt end of their shared journey. But beneath that, a vibrant, pulsing anticipation had taken root. The mistake of boarding the wrong train, the terrifying initial hours, the unexpected kindness, the shared vulnerabilities, the near kiss. It all coalesced into a profound realization. This wasn't just an accidental detour, it was a beginning. A door had opened, revealing a path she hadn't known existed. The shy, unassuming Willow who had boarded that train was not the same wolf standing on the platform now. A nascent courage flickered within her, fueled by the Alpha King's promise, by the warmth of his touch, by the unspoken understanding that had blossomed between them. The bustling station, once overwhelming, now felt vibrant, alive with possibilities. She took a deep breath, the sense of the world around her no longer a blur, but distinct and exciting. The journey was over, but the true adventure, she realized with a thrilling jolt, had just begun. Her mistake had been an introduction, a prelude to something far more profound and exhilarating than she could have ever imagined. The Alpha King had promised, and Willow, for the first time in her life, felt a thrilling certainty that he would keep his word.